Hi, everyone. We have one more panelist joining us, but we are going to get started. I got some notes. All right. Hey, thanks for coming to join us. This is Intro to TV Writing. I'm your moderator, Spiro Skentzos. And this is our 9th year doing this. It's always super fun. Thanks for always having us back. I'm going to introduce you to these people, and we're going to pick the brains clean of all information we need to write the perfect spec script. And they're not in order of lineup, but they will be in, that's how I have the bio. So, Kira Snyder. She is an Emmy and WGA award-winning writer and co-executive producer on the TV show Handmaid's Tale for Hulu. She's also written on The 100, Incursion, Eureka, Alphas, the vampire cult hit Moonlight, and she's also written pilots for Hulu, FX, and Amazon, and the movie Pacific Rim Uprising. She's a graduate of the Writers Guild's Showrunners training program and the Warner Brothers Television Writers Workshop. The Parish Mail is Kira's interactive young adult supernatural mystery series, and it's available on Kindle. Formerly a computer game designer, Kira has created games including the seminal alternate reality game Majestic. Yes, come on up, Michelle. Making a grand entrance is Michelle Paradise. We're going to get her name flagged in a second. And Michelle is co-showrunner and executive producer on Star Trek Discovery. She was on the originals for the entirety of its 5-season run, and prior to that, she wrote for Rogue and Heart of Dixie. Wow. Michelle also created, wrote, and starred in the MTV logo series X's and O's. Her first feature script and adaptation of a memoir recently completed post-production and will air on Lifetime in the fall.
Wonderful.
Next, we have Keto Shimizu. Please give her a applause. And spent much of her youth traveling the globe with the World Music Choir.
Nice.
A lifelong fan of movies and comic books, she attended film school at Emerson College in Boston, then moved to LA to pursue her dream as being a writer.
Awesome.
Following graduation, she worked in post-production, using nights and weekends to follow her true passion, writing. Her hard work paid off. She was accepted into NBC's Writers on the Verge program in 2009. And then she was staffed on The Cape, and then on Sci-Fi's Being Human, and then on CW's Arrow. And after 3 years writing for the DC comic adaptation, she transferred to the spin-off Legends of Tomorrow, where she's currently employed as writer and executive producer.
Wow.
Michael D. Fuller, he is our next counselor. There you are, down there. He co-created and executive produced the critically acclaimed Cinemax series Quarry. Previously, he worked as a writer on Sundance TV's Peabody Award-winning series Rectify, and as a co-executive producer on the USA series Damnation. And most recently, as co-executive producer on the upcoming Carlton Cuse-produced Netflix adaptation of Locke Key, the company. In 2016, he was honored by Variety as one of the top 10 writers to watch. Wow. Michael's latest pilot, Devil's Right Hand, is in development with Paramount TV and Anonymous. And he was born and raised in South Carolina. He attended the College of Charleston, where he majored in theater.
Wow.
Right next to me, Michael Narducci. He is a writer and producer. He most recently developed Warriors alongside Regina King for ABC. Prior to that, he was the showrunner of the originals. Nice. He also has written on The Vampire Diaries, Medium, The 4400, nice. The Crossing, and Waterfront. Michael's from Youngstown, Ohio. He graduated from Harvard and then got an MFA in creative writing from the University of Virginia. His short stories have appeared in the Texas Review, the Virginia Quarterly Review, and Gadfly magazine. He taught creative writing at the Idlewild Arts Academy for 7 years and has also taught writing in Boston, Charlottesville, South Central Los Angeles, and South Korea. Please give him a round of applause. Averie Huffine. She started her career in TV as an NBC page. Since then, her focus has been in producing and development, recently for Amy Pascal at Pascal Pictures, where she created an entire television department from the ground up.
Wow.
Previously, Averie has worked at Berman Braun, Invention Films, and for Sarah Colleton, where she worked on Showtime's Dexter and NBC's Handmaid. She is now head of the Boom Studios TV division, where she works to adapt their comic library to television. She attended Orange Coast College and Chapman University, where she majored in theater. Please give them all a big round of applause. So just some quick housekeeping to start. They're all really great to come and take their time out from their busy Comic-Con schedule for us. So we'll have a lot of questions which you'll be able to ask at that mic when we get to the Q&A part. Let's just remember that questions start with who, what, where, when, why, how. And so try to keep your build-up to those questions as short as possible. Also, for legal reasons, please don't pitch them or ask them to read your script. So with that behind us, let's begin. Real quick, if we could take a pulse of the room, who here has written a spec script before? Okay, great, quite a few of you. And others who haven't but are curious on how to do so? Okay, so know your audience. Excellent. Any people here applied to the writing programs, NBC, Writers, Warner Brothers, Disney? Okay, great. So we'll have a little something for everyone today. Now, there are two types of spec scripts you can write, a spec of an existing show and an original spec pilot. So we're going to talk about both of these, and they're both a little different, but we'll get into that. Because writing programs usually want a spec of a TV show, not an original pilot. But let's start with specking a show first. Why is it important to try to spec a show when you're starting out? What's the goal?
I mean, I think for, certainly for the programs that are, that tend to be the ones that take spec scripts as a requirement, I think it's really important for writers to be able to show that they can mimic a voice, an established voice, and a format, because TV writing is a pretty there's typically a standard sort of 5 or 6 act structure, and you hit certain dramatic beats with each one, and to show that you understand, you can break down the format of an existing show and imbue your own point of view into it, hopefully something that's unique and resonates with your reader despite if they know the show or not. I mean, that's kind of the emotional goal, I think, is to really connect no matter what. But I think if you can show that you have that skill and you can write something that is clean and professional and could be produced as part of the show's lineup, it's incredibly valuable.
You're saying that if you're a brand new writer, you need to prove to someone that you can write in the voice of that show.
Yeah,
and it's still the original
and establish it.
Yeah, I would totally agree, because that is the job. When you're the showrunner, you're setting the voice and the tone of the show, but you're on the staff, it's your job to, yes, absolutely infuse it with your own voice and point of view, but you're trying to write the way the show sounds, so it's incredibly useful for that purpose. The other thing also is, certainly for the programs that are required, very often when people are staffing, they're asking for pilots, and that's fantastic. There's a lot of really great ways to see people's voices there. But you never know. Sometimes showrunners want to read a spec of an existing show. It's tricky now because there is so much good TV. It's hard to know what people are going to want to read or be familiar with, because I would not know a really good episode of a show I don't watch, for instance. But if I was staffing for a show and we wrote a spec of something that I really liked, I would be like, yeah, I think I want to read that. I worked on a show called Eureka on Sci-Fi. And I love working on that show. It was sort of a light dramedy, sci-fi, but kind of funny, definitely on the lighter side. And I got the staffing meeting for that show off my Dexter spec. It was a really dark one. It was about a father and son murder team. It was super dark. It just so happened that the showrunner really liked Dexter and was excited to read an episode of it. So you don't necessarily know who's going to want to read what. And I do know some people who are staffing explicitly want to read for all the reasons that Keto was saying.
Well, and I think to all those points as well, but I also think there's a tremendous educational value in doing that, especially if you approach it not just from, I love Handmaid's Tale, and I'm gonna sit down and I'm gonna write an episode about this is what Jim's doing, but really picking apart what makes this show work in this way. What's the engine of it? How is it structured? Where do the reversals come? Where they don't come? Because there is a structure inherent to most television, and especially if you're doing a spec show, it's really a great, exercise in its own right, and then the added value.
Incredibly educational.
Everything you guys are saying.
Great. So I think that's just an important takeaway, is like to be able to nail that voice of that show, so that way an EP may read an original material and be like, you have a great voice, now write my voice, is essentially what they'll say to you, so you have to be prepared to do that. Let's talk about some nuts and bolts when writing a spec of a show, because a lot of people start out that way, and it's, like we said, a good way to learn the voice of the show. What are some of the things you look out for when you're reading the spec, especially for some of you who may have done a lot of reading recently for the writer solidarity or for staffing the show? What are the things that you're like, it's first 10 pages, like what are you looking out for? Either yes or no, like make you happy or make you sad?
Spec of an existing show?
Yeah, we can do existing show or pilot. This, right now we can talk either, but like, what do you see people doing wrong?
I would say I read quite a few during the staffing boost, but also in everybody here, like in staffing the show that I co-created and being involved in staffing other shows. And I think the biggest thing is the two things is one when writers over-explain and front-load everything in the first 10 pages because of the fear of, oh my God, I've only got 10 pages and I'm gonna get it all in here, and if they're not gonna, and that can be a very not beneficial to your cause. And I think that's the biggest thing, and then also just a specificity and a command and control of your world. I think those two things kind of go hand in hand, because it's, knowing, like, if you trust the world and you trust your writing and your command of it, then you don't need to throw the kitchen sink in the first 10 pages.
I agree, and I'd say to that end, character and emotion. I think if you want to hook a reader, punch them in the gut, really like grab them in the heart, and they won't be able to stop, and I did a lot of reading for Staffing Boost and all that as well as staffing this year, and the ones that really got to me were the ones that not only introduced a world and a point of view and something that felt very personal, but had those crackling characters that really came to life on the page, and I was like, ooh, who are these people? I want to know more, and then you get that curiosity and you want to keep going. But if it's just plot, or it's just, mystery without any kind of character, like, I'll be like, yeah, okay, but like, I've got other things I need to read,
Yeah, it's fascinating. It's really easy and tempting to get caught in the cool twists and the angles, but I completely agree. It really is about character, because TV, even more than movies, it's about character, it's about relationships. So when I'm reading the early pages, and absolutely the world is compelling and interesting, but I want to meet people who are interesting, who are in interesting tension-filled relationships with other characters, because that shows to me that the writer knows how TV works. It's not just incident. We can always work with writers to understand how to infuse incident for our particular shows, but that innate sense of kind of what is at the heart of TV, which is these characters you kind of invite into your home. It's very intimate. Week after week, they're coming into your home. That's really where to spend the time, right off the bat.
Yeah, I was. Oh, wow, that's loud. Move that back. I was going to say the same thing about character. The other thing about that is, if you're getting staffed on a show, there are senior writers in place, showrunners in place, who can help with all of like the genre stuff or the mystery or the whatever it is. But being able to write character. Another thing I will say is know your characters. Know who they are, know what their motivations are. It's very tricky reading pilots when characters are making choices that feel unmotivated, either by the situation or by the character. And if you're going to do that, have a really good reason to do that, and then make sure that that's super clear. Otherwise, if they're just making choices because it feels like a super dramatic or twisty choice to make, it's going to feel false.
And then, and Averie, question for you in particular, which you guys can jump in on as well, but you have all this comic book property that you're looking to develop and for writers, and all that stuff. Are you looking, like, what type of stuff do you read? Do you only want to read comic superhero scripts, or, again, is it back to character?
I read superheroes and
specific comic plot lines every single day. And usually when we're adapting something from a comic book, what I'm looking for within that comic book is a cool character. Because that's usually what the writer's going to pull out, is somebody that we care about, that we want to follow from day to day to day. When I'm reading scripts, I actually went to a writer who wrote a script about spending wine country with her father, and I wanted to hire her for like a huge Game of Thrones type thing. And it was simply because she had an incredible voice and wrote incredible dialogue and knew what every choice her character was going to make, and everything felt motivated. And so for me, reading that, I went, well, let's just see if she is interested in writing genre. So I don't actually need an exact genre script or a superhero script or something that is an exact copy of what I'm looking to adapt. I just want to hear that you care about your character, you have a great voice, that your characters are motivated. And then I try to match you with the comic book to the best of my ability. I want the writer who comes on and adapts something to feel like this is something they would write anyway or are looking to write, so that they feel ownership over the IP as we're going into the development process.
And when I'm to that same point, it sounds like with the wine country, I would almost rather read something the first 5 to 10 pages that is just focused on, I would rather it be front-loaded with character, because that's what is good, rather than, to Kira's point, we can work with people to infuse, set pieces, plot points, genre, tension, all that stuff, but like showing that you have that, it's like, okay, that's so much what motivates what we've seen over the past 10
That's what we
years.
talk about
Yeah, that's all
day.
we're in the room all day talking about these people, so it's like having a sense of that, infused from the beginning.
The world can be crazy, but you want your character to feel believable.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll follow you through whatever parallel dimension, supernatural thing you're doing, as long as I care about your character.
Yeah, and their relationships, it seems so important. Like, Keto and Kira and Michelle, all you guys, like, it's all genre, but like, it's all character, it's all family. Like,
Yeah.
there's some version of family, no matter how dysfunctional or insane it is, and those we can relate to that, and that's what we want, right? It's something you can read it, it's relatable for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly whenever we've looked for potential writers on Legends of Tomorrow, it's always been to find not someone who can do superheroes, not someone who can do time travel, not even someone, it's someone who can do that dysfunctional family drama or comedy. I mean, honestly, like we do a lot of that in our show. So, it's like, does the script make me laugh? Or does it, as long as it makes us feel, and those are the writers who've really flourished in our room.
Yeah, cool. Okay, let's talk for a second then specifically about the writing original pilots, because you want to be able to show you can write in the voice of a show, and you want to be able to say, hey, here's my voice, and the importance of that, and which, like Michael, you prefer to read one or the other, or how you come to those.
It's funny. I've been listening to all this, and I agree with everything you guys are saying. And there's also a little voice in the back of my head that's saying, "But wait a second," because it's like, if I'm reading for the originals, it's a very specific voice and show and content. And I never didn't interview a great writer who wrote a great script. I always wanted to meet those writers. But sometimes, all things being equal, really talented writers who wrote a genre spec pilot would probably have a little bit of an advantage. And, like if Aaron Sorkin wrote an amazing spec, that doesn't necessarily mean he would by nature gravitate towards a genre thing. So the funny story is, I read this writer a long time ago, and she wrote this legal drama, which was amazing, and I was interviewing her for the originals. And it was a legal drama, but I was reading her for a show about a family of immortal vampires. And I was just like, I don't know. I don't know if this person loves and is passionate about genre and loves and is passionate about, dialogue spoken by people who are over, 10 centuries old, And I said to this writer, do you have anything else? And she said, well, I have a spec of this show called Fringe. And I was like, oh, all right, that's a genre show. It's not exactly CW vampires, but it's, and I love the act outs and I love the dialogue. And it was a way to see that she also captured another show's voice. And those two scripts together just blew me away. And that's why I hired Michelle Paradise.
What? Michelle, what?
It's true.
It's a great story. I didn't know that story. That's awesome. We'll open up to questions in a few seconds if anyone wants to get ready to go to the mic. But let's talk about that again some more. Like, you had 2 killer samples from her. You had, this original legal drama for a vampire show, and then, this supernatural, sci-fi thing. And it's, people need to have that, right? Like, you need to have more than one sample. You need to have, an original and a spec, right?
Absolutely. I mean, again, for that that exact reason, it's like you might have loved this one aspect of this person's writing, but then there needs to be that follow-up. Again, it's a very competitive position that they're going for. You need to cover your bases, and you only have so much time to meet with so many writers. And absolutely, a portfolio is just that. It's a portfolio. It's not just one sample. And yes, you might have poured your heart and soul into that one perfect spec pilot or whatever, but then you gotta just keep doing it, and you gotta make another one. And again, if you want to do this for a living, then it's your job now, before you even get paid for it. It is your job right now. And you need to be constantly working on something, or multiple somethings, because if you don't take it seriously, when you're not getting paid to do it, then you're not gonna get paid to do it. Like, it's not a one and done sort of thing. It is a forever kind of thing. If you really want to do this, always be doing it.
Yeah, the question I get, which I'm sure we all get, is like, all right, I wrote the script, what do I do now? Mm-hmm. And that's usually...
Write another one.
Yeah, that's usually subjective to whoever that person is, where they are with it, but the number one answer, the first answer to that is always, okay, great, start writing the next one.
Because you will get better with every single one.
Exactly.
Like, yes, you might have written what you think is like, the perfect one, but guess what? It isn't, because when you write the next one, it's going to be even better. And then when you write the next one, even better. It's like, it's so awesome. And again, it's a skill. You got to hone it. You got to work it.
It's a muscle. And then as a sort of on the career side, when you're meeting with possible representation, or you're meeting with executives or other producers, very often it's not even just the thing. They want to be in business with you. They want to know that you can generate scripts that are awesome year after year, season after season. So when you're meeting with managers or lawyers or executives or producers, it's not just the one thing. It's that they're looking to build a relationship, and showing that you have it in you, that it's not just the one idea, that you have a font of ideas and polished scripts to back them up. That makes you really interesting to people who are looking to get in business with a new writer.
And that you're self-propelled. Like you don't, as a manager or agent, they're not going to want to have to be like, all right, are you writing today? Are you working on
How's that script coming?
Like, they're not there to babysit you. They're there to help you. It's a working relationship. It's like, you help them by creating awesome things, and they help you by getting those things sold and forming those bridges between executives and all that. So, it's your job now if it's really something you want.
And I was actually going to ask you a question, so go ahead.
If I like a script of yours, I will read a second script of yours. And I would prefer that when I reach out to your representation, if I say, do you have another sample? And they say, well, no, that's the only one I have so far that I can share it. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't really help me, because part of my job is I need to also prove to my higher-ups that you are absolutely 100% the right person for this job. And the only way I can do that is if I know your voice from every angle. So the worst answer I can get is, no, I don't have another sample for this person.
Yeah, and it can be hard, especially if you are doing this while doing another job, to find the time for it. I mean, I think we probably all have different stories on how we broke in, but I was in a whole other industry. I was working in technology, and I was writing mornings, nights, weekends. I did not have much of a social life, but I got those really bad early scripts out of the way before anyone needed to see them, and kind of got that muscle flex. So it's hard to chip away at that time, but you can do it. I mean,
Absolutely.
Lots of people had full-time jobs. Some very demanding ones have families. It's hard to find the time, but if you treat it like a job and you find that time, that's the only way to get better.
And also the same goes, not just if you're trying to impress an agent or a manager or get that coveted staffing meeting. It goes for when you're applying to be the writer's PA on a show. Because that is a tried and true way to work your way up the ladder and hopefully get to that coveted staffing position. When we were, we had some turnover in our room this year, and we were like, okay, interviewing potential new support staff, and the only people we want to let in are people who are serious about writing, because that is, it is a ladder you start climbing from day one when the first coffee run. So it really is important that, if you want to do this job in any capacity, you are proving to people who want to help you that you are serious and you are dedicated and you will give up the time, because all of us did that.
Which, P.S., that's how I knew I didn't want to be a writer. Someone gave me that advice when I was first graduating college, and I was like, maybe I'll be a writer. And I'm like, oh, someone's going to find my blog and I'm going to get famous. That doesn't happen. So someone was like, you have to be writing all the time. You have to be doing your blog and writing a script and working on a book and just writing in all your free time. And I was like, I absolutely do not want to do that. I would rather watch TV all the time. So if you're hearing this and you're like, I don't want to do that, there are other jobs, lots of them. Hit me up, be a development exec.
Michelle.
I was just going to say one thing to add to that. You were just talking about filling the support staff. We had to hire, this season I hired all new writer's assistants, writer's PA for our room, and I actually didn't consider anyone who didn't have a sample to read, because we are looking for people who are writers. I mean, there's wanting to be a writer where you actually don't write, and then there's being a writer where you actually do write. And as part of the process, even those jobs are so hugely competitive.
Yeah.
I had probably 30 samples just for one writer's assistant position, and I could have had a bunch more. So to whittle it down, I was reading scripts, and part of the basis for whether or not I would call them in for an interview was the strength of those scripts. And so I called in the people with the strongest scripts, which tells me that they've gone through the process of writing multiple scripts, multiple drafts, and that they're very serious about this, because ultimately, if you have the opportunity to get into a writer's room, even if it's a PA and your job is getting lunch and coffee, that is the gateway to then being a writer's assistant, to being a staff writer and moving on up from there. So if that's what you want to do, then write.
I'm sorry, you were standing for a few minutes. Let's start with some questions.
When you get a spec script in, do they have to give you a letter of release saying that, because what if they come back 6 months later, hey, that episode that I just saw is similar to the episode that I spec'd you?
I'm serious. I've never actually heard of an instance where that's actually happened. I think it's so rare that anyone would ever take an idea from something that they've read as a submission and then use it in their show for that reason, for the crazy legal thing that could happen after.
You probably have a really good lawsuit on your hands if that happened.
If that happened.
But it does raise an interesting point. If you spec a show, I wouldn't necessarily submit that spec to that show to get on the job.
Absolutely.
It's much better to spec Fringe to get on a CW show or whatever, because the people who write that show are so crazy psychotic about the way they do things. If your spec is 60 pages and they like 57-page scripts, or if your spec is 45 pages and we always have 40, our Act 5 is always on this, and the way they write action and the length of their scenes, it's very difficult to make your script exactly that, not having that insider information. So they're probably not the best showcase for you to spec a show and then give that spec to that particular show.
But certainly for the legal reason too, I can never read a Legends of Tomorrow script. I can't. And it's because our show does so many crazy things, and it's so unpredictable where we could end up that we might already have something like your idea on our board. We might already be writing it, and if you hand me that and I read it, then I'm like, well, shit, now what am I going to do? We have an episode we're producing right now, and now I'm going to have a lawsuit. No, I can't do it. So,
Your show does so much, and that you could have a stack of Legends spec scripts and throw a dart at one of them, and chances are you've either done it or you disregarded that idea for a particular reason.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, this is a question for Averie specifically. You kind of actually already started talking about development, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your path to getting into development, because it doesn't seem like there is this straight line to that.
There's not a straight line. It's a lot of zigzags. I first started as an NBC page, so if you like 30 Rock, I wore that uniform for a whole year, and I worked, seating the audience at The Tonight Show. I think the other thing is, before I found development, because I had no attachment to the industry when I started, I didn't really know what the path would be either. So there's a couple of things that you can do. One, do every job that you can. I started as a PA for ESPN. I did the NBC Page program where I worked on The Tonight Show. And then it wasn't until I started going down a path where I got an internship at like Sci-Fi Channel that I was like, oh, development exists. And there's nice people here. And I decided to try to go down that path a little bit. And how I ended up finding that I really wanted to focus on development was, one, I already really loved TV and spent all of my free time watching it. I don't have any friends. But I realized that there was a job that allowed me to watch TV, and part of watching TV made me a better executive, to know what else was out there, what was being written, what was competitive. And I also spoke with other people in my field. I would reach out to female executives or executives I admired that worked in the development space and asked if I could buy them a coffee, if they'd sit down with me and tell me about their path. I'd also read books from other inspirational female executives that I loved, or books about the industry. I know that sounds so cheesy to be like, go to the library and get a book, but I do think that those were written for a reason and they do help. And just sitting down with other executives. People are nicer than you think. I never had somebody say no to me when I reached out, because for the most part they're flattered that you care about what they're doing and that you thought about them. And if they do say no, who cares? You're back at the same spot you were to begin with, and you're no worse off. But there's a lot of bravery to sending an email and reaching out, and for the most part, people will be kind.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi.
I was wondering if you had any guidelines or best practices for choosing a show to write a spec script for. Like, is a cheer script relevant today?
No.
But the programs are now very particular about what you can spec. It's not like when we were in it. Because there's so many shows now, there's a list that they want you to write a spec from. I think if you go to the NBC, Warner Brothers, Disney sites for that, or just do Google search for that, you'll probably find on someone's blog, here's a list of what you can or should not write.
And then from that list, I would choose a show that you know well, that you identify with emotionally in some way, because again, the people who are going through these submissions read hundreds of these things, and again, to stand out, you want it to be emotional, you want it to feel real, and you want it to pop off the page regardless of whether that person is familiar with the show or not. It should have that sort of universal emotional truth to it. And so yeah, the more that you connect to the show, the more the reader will connect to your interpretation of the show, if that makes sense.
Yeah, make sure you love it, because even if you think you know the show as a viewer, if you're going to write a spec of it, you should go back and watch every single episode as a writer, and that's going to take a lot of time. You've been on the air for a while. And you have to love it enough to be able to do that. And then if you go back and you watch it as a writer and you start looking at how many act breaks do they have, what do they do with their act breaks, what's the teaser out usually, what kinds of stories do they tell, what kinds of character development do they have? Oh, hi. I'm Michelle Paradise.
It's official.
And as a resource, you go to the Writers Guild of America website. They have a wonderful library of scripts available. I believe. Is it online?
I don't know if the library's online. I think
have to physically go there.
But there are sites that...
If you're in Los Angeles,
there are
go to
sites
the
that
library.
host those scripts.
But then yes, look online for scripts of whatever show you're doing, so you can mimic that format and that breakdown and see how they allot their acts and everything. It's very, very helpful.
I was shocked by how many scripts I was able to find just by going to Google and typing in the name of that show, pilot, PDF.
Yeah.
You could find so much
many
stuff.
categories.
Yeah.
It's great.
The internet is not evil, it's very helpful.
It's also sometimes evil.
Hello.
Hi. When writing a spec script for an existing show, where do you balance what the show has already established versus reestablishing it in your spec script?
Yeah, it is tricky, and I'm curious to hear what people have to say. There's different ways to do it. I have seen like a little one paragraph kind of recap or reset at the beginning of your spec script, sort of setting the stage a little bit. It's tricky with shows that are serialized because the show may have moved past where you were. But I think the thing I found most common is just a little quick, a separate page before the script starts with a little recap. But what else?
Previously on.
Previously on, yeah.
Keto is the queen of that.
Yeah, I did. When I wrote my first spec, which miraculously got me into the NBC program, I wrote a Lost spec. And it was really freaking hard to do. But what I ended up doing was, because it was so serialized and it's such a complicated mythology, is I did a lot of research. So I found, emotionally I knew the gap that I wanted to fill. I knew exactly where this episode needed to fit in the series, because it was between two episodes where I was like, wait a minute, we missed a big step here. What happened? And I wanted to answer that question emotionally for myself. And for the reading audience. So yeah, I had a previously on Lost page where it was just like, this is what happened in leading up to this episode, and it really helped frame the reader's mindset in that way. But then again, if you're doing a super serialized show, you got to kind of find space to tell the story. So again, if you're really close to the show, you really love it. If there's a character you think doesn't get enough, doesn't have enough of a voice at times, focus on that character if that's someone that you really relate to, and tell their story, or tell, have it an episode that's, just from a point of view that's maybe a little different.
Did you do a Dr. Arts episode?
There
was no the characters weren't sitting around the campfire saying, well, we're stuck on this island. You don't need to completely reset every time when you're writing your spec. And I think the first draft, err on the side of putting in too much. And then the second draft, wow, I have a lot. I can pare this down, and then get to a level where you feel comfortable and make sure that all of those expository lines, resetting things, are necessary for the story that you're telling in that particular spec.
And most of the people who are going to be reading it who are running the programs or are in the position of hiring you or whatever will be able to understand what you're doing. It's that, to that point. It's like you don't have to have a 5-page pilot to remind them of what they've seen. They'll be able to track it, I think.
Yeah, and most of them will be aware of the premise of the show.
Exactly.
So they don't really have to go all the way back. Just a little sort of reset. This is where this character is. This is where this character is. This is kind of what's happening in the show. And boom,
Is it safe to assume that whoever's reading that spec script would have some, basic understanding of the characters' relationships?
I think they do try when they do divvy up their reading. I know
Yeah.
Karen Horn always.
They'll ask you
if you're familiar with shows.
Yeah, they'll click all these shows that you know, and they'll send people, one year I got 150, 30 Rock scripts when I was reading.
But again, you can't always guarantee that. So I would sometimes err on the side of caution. Again, make sure that it's universally emotionally resonant as much as possible, because then it shouldn't matter whether you are familiar with the show. It's like you're going to sit down and have an adventure with characters who pop off the page and are interesting and tell an emotional story.
There's a long history of people picking up Spider-Man issue 95, having not read issue 94, 93, 92. We're at a big convention celebrating massive serialized storylines. If you make it good, people will recognize that.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thank you all.
Cool, thanks. Hello.
Hello. Oh, sorry. I'm just kind of wanted to know how you all find the difference of emulating an established voice, but also knowing when to maybe create your own original.
Sort of as we were talking about earlier, I think it's important to show you can do both, to have that spec of an existing show that shows you can mimic up, an established, voice and format, but also to have a sample that shows what, your story, your emotional truth, your, world building. So I think you need both.
I think when I was a kid, I liked to play G.I. Joes because I liked that show and I wanted to tell my own version of that show. I think it's that, I was obsessed with The Sopranos. Guess what I spec'd, and other shows that you don't like, you shouldn't even try to spec them. You should stick with stuff that you really are, as was said, very passionate about. And as you kind of come up in the world and you're thinking, wow, I really want to make a show about this, bingo, that's a show you should go write. I mean, I know that sounds ridiculous, but that's the only way I know how to describe it.
Well, and the story Michael just told about the two people who were on the panel who were sitting beside me, but Michelle had her own pilot that was her voice, and then she had a spec that showed she could write in the other. It's like kind of having both of those, you know, like you should still, if you're specking, you should still bring as much of your voice to it, but it should be within the framework of the show. And I think having both of those is
Yeah.
portfolio.
Yeah, and if they have a different feel to them, you know, like in the example that the lovely Michael Narducci gave, you know, Fringe is a super genre show, and then the other one was a legal family drama, brother-sister thing. So if you can think in those terms, because yeah, as people are looking at different samples of yours, it's fantastic if you have this one thing over here, but if someone is staffing for genre or whatever, you want to be able to have another thing to show them. You know, I would suggest not making it so wildly different. I wouldn't write a half-hour sitcom and then a 1-hour drama, because then someone's not going to know what to do with you. But generally speaking, if you're in the half-hour space, you can be there, and if you're in the 1-hour space, you can be there, and dramedies kind of wiggle back and forth.
Yeah, and the other thing you can do within a spec is choose a show and develop a story that really speaks to the kind of writing you want to do. So if you love writing action, pick a show that has a lot of action in it, and really lean into that. Like I want to be an action writer, so you can really lean into that. Or if you are someone who likes to pepper some comedy in your drama, find a show that sometimes goes lighter, and show that you can write a good joke. Or if you like super quippy, bantery, Joss Whedon dialogue, find a show where that would fit and show that. So that's kind of how, even when you're on staff, it's how you get your own voice a little bit within the kind of the boundaries of the show.
Absolutely, thank you.
We have 10 minutes left. Hey.
How's it going, guys? Hey, man. Great G.I. Joe example. First of all, that was awesome. Real quick about rules. My own problem comes in, I write genre, and for original pilots, how much of the rules of that world do you stuff in, and how soon do you stuff it all in? Yeah.
Well, again, I would lead not with rules, but with character and emotion. So, I would concentrate on making sure that feels real and that draws the reader in before you start unpacking rules. And again, the thing that is, requires some skill in writing genre, which most of us up here do, is balancing, the rules of the world, the genre aspect with the character and with the emotional storytelling. So in a scene, you have to be able to do both. You have to be able to keep the story going forward while deepening those character relationships and complicating the emotional drive and challenging the hero's goal. It's all those things that each scene has to accomplish. And if you can do it well, like bam, that's a fucking great. Sorry, a freaking great. And
you're doing so well.
I'm sorry. I knew it was gonna be. I would answer that. Of course, the pregnant woman. I'd say that's a skill.
I completely agree. And the other thing, it really depends on what your story is, but if your story, if this suits your story, sometimes it's very helpful to have a touchstone character who is new to the world. So we, as the audience, are seeing through their eyes all these, so as they're learning, we're learning, so it's a really organic way to kind of like Farscape, Crichton kind of shows up in this crazy world, and we're with him as he's understanding where he is and what's going on. That's not going to work for every story, obviously, but even so that's an example of using character, but even with characters that live in the world, as Keto was saying, using them to reveal what the audience thinks. The other thing also just to keep in mind is it's really, really helpful when you think you've gotten it nailed, give it to someone else to read. And they will tell you, they should tell you, if they start to glaze over at any point, if they get confused, because you know your world so well, we all know our world so well, it's kind of impossible to see where things aren't quite working, whether it's confusing or over-explained or under-explained. So make sure you get some feedback from someone you trust, and they'll tell you, hey, man, this is a little confusing, or hey, I could stand a little bit, know more about this, that kind of thing.
And if you really, to me, I've always approached it, and I think it could, like some of the examples that we've used here, is like how much do the characters need to know about the rules, and that can be as much or as little as possible, but like just talking about Lost, they have no idea what the hell this island is, but they're discovering it as they go, and there's a lot of rules to the island that they discover, but the ones they need in the immediacy are what they learn. And I think Lost is a great example of, but also like in a completely different space, Mad Men, that pilot has that character who comes into the new world, and it's like, it's showing the rules, I think, is also a great thing to try to adhere to, as much as not telling. You know, like Mad Men's great because there's a character who's quite literally being trained on the job, so that's a great way into this world. Lost, they have no idea what's in the jungle, but they're seeing that there's rules to it, that they don't know exactly what everything is or where they are. I think that's what I've always tried to do.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Al. Hi.
Hi, how are you doing? I have a 14-year-old daughter who I think is an amazing writer. Can you give me any advice in terms of what I can tell her to do to help her so she can hone in on that craft and, you know, in terms of what's good writing and what's bad writing? Because she writes, I think it's good, but, you know, a few guys would think it's good. So, is there any...
You're such a wonderful, supportive mom. That's amazing. That's so great.
Thank you.
Is your daughter in college, out of college?
She's 14.
She's 14, sorry, I missed that part.
She wants to be a writer. She knows,
that's
she knows she wants to
fantastic.
go to Yale and she wants to be a writer.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, yeah, keep...
Or NYU.
Yeah, keep writing, absolutely. And I don't know, I mean, she's so young, I'd say, like, if she needs to learn, you know, more about sort of formatting, is she trying to do TV scripts?
I think she definitely wants to get into TV. She's lately been looking at shows I don't necessarily like How to Get Away with Murder, Shonda Rhimes stories, and she's talking to me about how it's written and the story, and she's actually analyzing the details of it. So I think it is her passion because that's what she's always talking about.
Well, I hope she hires us when she...
Yeah, that's wonderful. Good start.
Get her a library card and get her to read everything and read books by writers about writing, but also read scripts. Like I said, you could Google and you could find them online for free. And as she gravitates toward a certain kind of writing, you know, maybe she wants to be a novelist, maybe she wants to be a playwright, maybe she wants to be a 1-hour drama writer, a half-hour comedy writer. You know, there's so many different kinds of writing. Your job, I think, I'm a parent too, expose my children to all kinds of different art and see what awakens within them, the thing that makes them just come alive and be on fire. And once you do that, then, you know, they'll take it over from there.
The other thing I'd add real quick is if she is involved in like theater, basically being involved with a collaborative creative project with a deadline is really good practice for being a screenwriter, and it seems a little counterintuitive. It almost doesn't matter what it is, you know, some kind of creative project where you're working with different people, because the writing is often very solo, but TV in particular involves relationships and collaboration kind of all the time. So the sooner she gets the feel for like, you know, how to deal with feedback you don't agree with, and how to deal with like, you know, challenging personalities. How do you all pull together and like put on a show at a certain deadline, or put out the paper, or put out the literary magazine. Just when I was in high school, I found that super useful, although I didn't expect it at the time that it would come in handy.
Cool, thanks.
All right, thank you very much.
We have time for one more question. Sorry, it's not my fault, it's time's fault. Before we do that, I wanted to see if anyone up here, if you guys want to either have like a final thought or words, share what you're working on next, or what your Twitter, you know, how to find you on Twitter, you know, I mean, anything? Final advice?
I mean, I just want to back up because obviously I'm not a writer. But I think that all the things that they're saying, if you do want to go down that path, you should always be consuming and always be creating. There's no wrong way to do that. You should watch all the TV that you want to write. You should go to the movies that you want to create. And then you should make those things with your friends all the time, constantly. And you should fill all of your free time with that. That's part of this job too, is like, my job is consuming and creating, and I do that in my free time as well to this day.
Yeah, and to that point, there's a director who we're not really supposed to talk that much about anymore, but he had a great, it was Woody Allen, he had a great, one great thing that he said, as opposed to other things that he said, but he was you know, essentially, to that point, consume as much film as you can, consume as much television as you can, consume as much storytelling as you can, And by virtue of kind of osmosis, you're going to be like, you're not even going to realize the connections it's making in your subconscious, which is like, that was one good thing.
Cool. Okay, we gotta do our question.
Cool, thank you. No pressure. So I wanted to find out, you talk about the hierarchy and the ladder of making it into the room. What if you're a person like me who I have like an extraordinary alien visa, so doing certain jobs like PAing or being an assistant, I'm not legally allowed to do. So just wondering, I know it's weird. I'm just wondering like what other strategies you might recommend for someone trying to get into the room if the ladder isn't accessible. And then secondly, in terms of pilots, how much is it better to put everything in and swing big, like, or to sort of make the pilot more like slow? I guess.
Two disparate questions.
Real quick, I would say try your best to get an agent and apply to all those ABC programs, Warner Brothers Writers Workshop. I don't think those programs have any limitation based on U.S. citizenship. Yeah. And agents, if you can make them money, they will hire. They will figure it out. That's what they do. So, and then your other question, I think, real quick, I would say you got to just make it great. And if you are stuffing and cramming information that belongs in episode 4 into episode 1 because you're just trying to make it cool, I think you know where I'm going. It's stuffed and crammed and it's not great. So allow yourself the confidence to allow yourself to breathe so that those characters come alive and they feel like you're telling the most emotional story with all these hints of great things to come, and there's great potential there. That's how I would answer that question.
I would also say, I can't speak to your specific visa situation, but there are other jobs in the industry and companies in the industry where you can get an entry-level job and they do sponsor. And you can write from there in your free time and work on your craft while you have a job that will support you in this country and a company that will support you. It's not the easiest way, but there are other avenues if you want to write and you can write in your free time.
There are also, you might look at pods, like companies that are run by really big showrunners. Stop?
No, we have to stop. You in particular must stop.
But I was having a really good thought. Should we try that again?
You guys, thanks so much for coming. Please give them a big round.